Welcome to the Echo of Connections podcast, where we bring you the tools, resources, and ideas to help those of us in need work through our traumas, along with bringing a deeper understanding of resiliency, miracles, mental health, and emergency services. We welcome guests from all walks of life, starting with police dispatchers, officers, and the families of first responders, along with professionals to help guide us towards a better living. You can find Echo of Connections on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon's Audible, and our YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our links in the description below. Hello, and welcome to the Echo of Connections podcast. I am your host, Gabe Hansen, with my mother, Dawn Hansen.
Hello. And we are here I am in Rockville, Maryland, with my bestest friend in the whole world, Christina Bour.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We are here to share her experience and strength and knowledge of body work and how that interplays with how we feel emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and things that she's learned through her 26 years in massage therapy, which is really just the basic but much more complex background, which I will let you explain.
Okay. Yeah, when people ask what I do, I usually say body work instead of massage therapy, just because it is almost like a different thing. I mean, I love massage and I love receiving it, but in terms of what I'm actually doing with people, that's not really massage. So certainly when a new client calls, if that's what they're expecting, they're going to be disappointed because what I do is a lot more subtle and kind of working with mostly the lymphatic system and the organs and the nervous system. And so it really doesn't feel much of anything like a massage. The only thing it has in common is you're lying on a massage table, but very different from regular massage.
So when a client comes to you, what is the first thing that you sort of start with to figure out what they might need? Or
yeah, I mean, usually I just ask a general question like, what prompted you to call to make an appointment? And, usually it is something physical. But, when they're actually in the treatment room for an appointment, usually I let them talk about whatever the physical issue is that is usually the main presenting thing. And then I ask follow-up questions, usually how their sleep is, how their digestion is, and what their sort of overall emotional, state is. I mean, I don't do like any kind of actual talk therapy with them, but just generally, are you an anxious person? Are you fairly calm? Are you, twisting in the wind? Yeah, or, anything like that. And that kind of adds more layers. Like even if they came in with, a neck problem or a shoulder problem, I'm sort of trying to get a more complete picture of what things could be, creating that, adding to that, making that worse, making it better. We all know any kind of physical pain that we have, if we don't sleep well, it's going to make any pain we have worse. So it's, so I always ask about digestion, sleep, and then just kind of overall, emotional state without getting too deep into that.
Yeah. And so I noticed you mentioned neck and shoulder pain. I take it that's pretty common.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah.
Do you tend to find that in most people, or is there a group of people, or?
I mean, I guess people usually either come, because of the kind of practice I've built up, I actually have a lot of people whose main complaint is digestive. They may have other issues, but the way they kind of made their way to me is because, so many people have just really chronic, yucky digestive problems. And, sometimes some of the medical stuff can help, but it's usually not a perfect solution, of course, but then, in terms of musculoskeletal, neck, shoulder, headaches, low back, those are the big ones. Yeah.
And so digestive issues, how do people how did that end up being the thing that sort of people ended up coming to you?
I guess after all these years, most people come to me through word of mouth. So it must just be that that's, it is something that, friends mention to each other, or spouses, or, family, or whatever, because oftentimes so many of us have one level of digestive problem or another. We don't usually talk about it at parties, but most people have acid reflux or, some kind of irritable bowel or even just bloating and gas. Again, it's not like it's going to kill you, but it can make your everyday life kind of miserable. Maybe it's manageable, but it's not great, and so usually it's, one like family member telling another one about my kind of work or whatever. I mean, I don't have a huge practice. It's just me.
Yeah.
So this sort of a grapevine thing, but it just has kind of ended up that, of course, a lot of people have chronic, maybe it's low grade, maybe it's medium grade, but it's enough that it kind of affects your quality of life. And there are not usually medical solutions that really, really fix it. Like it's usually, tolerable, but maybe you have, some bad days thrown in there, and overall it really kind of affects your life negatively.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what sort of things do you tend to find helps people?
It depends, a lot of, of course, everybody talks about these days, like the connection between mind and body, like, not even really a connection. There is just no division. There's no dividing line between mind and body. What your mind is thinking, your body is also sort of thinking, reacting to, storing, and all that. So, really with anybody, not just with certain digestive issues, I'm always trying to help people's nervous systems downregulate, especially in emergency services, the way, you guys work. I mean, I work in Washington, D.C., so the kind of nervous system issues I see are more like political stress and,
Right.
the stress of being a lawyer in a law firm. So it's a totally different type of stress than you deal with. But, we're all biological organisms that respond to stress. It may not be exactly the kind that you all are facing, but it's still, down-regulating people's nervous systems is kind of the baseline for really almost any problem. Because if your sympathetic nervous system is upregulated, then any pain that you are feeling, any digestive problem you are having is just going to be worse. So it's kind of like a no-lose proposition. You downregulate the nervous system, and I don't even have to understand what the person's problem is. It's probably going to help at least a little bit. So, I'm all for the easy solution.
Simplicity at its best.
Mhm.
So for the downregulation of the systems,
Sympathetic nervous system. Mhm.
So do you basically, how does that sort of start? Like how do you begin that process?
Right. It totally depends on the person. It really, really does, because, some people are talkers, and like the way that they're going to feel calmer is by talking during the session, which is not ideal for me, because then I cannot necessarily feel as clearly with my hands and really focus on what I'm feeling. But if that's what they need to, first of all, to feel relaxed just in the setting, because, they might feel nervous just about the process of getting a massage or getting body work. So there's an element of talking, and in that regard, again, I don't mean by any means like talk therapy, but just someone hearing them and me, just kind of listening and acknowledging and helping them make a connection between that and what's happening in their body. So it's just really kind of a very simple acknowledging, really, because again, it's not like I'm doing talk therapy, but sometimes that's a step for somebody. And then in terms of working with the nervous system itself, most often I'm using craniosacral therapy for that, which is just a type of body work that's one of its main things, is to try to balance the nervous system and just kind of turn that volume of the sympathetic nervous system down, which again is kind of a one size fits all. No matter what the person's problem is, if you try to balance that out, it's probably going to at least start to feel a little bit better. It's a good first step.
It sounds like you find that people really like to be heard, and that one of the things you really specialize in is listening both with your hands, whether it's what their body is telling you, and then also when people are talking, listening to what people are saying. And
yeah, and sometimes, they've never had a chance to have a conversation with somebody like me who, like, maybe they have realized that, oh, my irritable bowel is worse when I go visit my mother-in-law or something, or in your case, if you've
Weird.
had a really, really stressful day at work for you and your colleagues. So maybe they've made that link, but maybe they've never had a chance to test drive that theory with another person. Maybe they're sort of either embarrassed or uncertain to even, talk about that out loud. And so to have a chance to sort of spitball that with somebody where like, that's all I think about all the time, is those kind of connections. So I'm all about that and I'm happy to talk about it and sort of, validate in a way. Maybe they're already thinking, oh, if I could figure out a way to calm down, maybe the pain I'm having or the physical issue I'm having would be less. So I'm just sort of providing really the context for that to happen. Some people they're kind of already, they have a sense of it, but I'm sort of validating that, amplifying that, giving them a chance to really kind of really know and accept that. And then knowledge is power, right? That can just sort of saying it out loud and knowing that that's true for you can really give you an edge in maybe making it a little less bad the next time you have to visit your mother-in-law. It sounds simple, but just kind of saying it out loud and, having someone say, yeah, I think that sounds really possible. And here's what I'm feeling in your body, and it doesn't have to be super complicated.
Right. And I know that you also have had people come to you who've had long time experience of not really getting much relief or trying lots of different avenues to try to find relief. And then I think through those you've had a story of some sort of a miracle where things really you helped or you guys worked together to make things work out. I don't know if you have an example of that you could share.
I guess I'd kind of like to wiggle out of that question a little bit and answer it in a backwards way in that I can't offhand think of any like really super obvious big, angels are singing miracles, but I see a lot of small miracles, frankly, almost every day, what I would call a miracle in terms of people like that light of recognition going off in their eye when either themselves, like I said, they sort of already have an inkling that maybe some different things are linked in their body, and just even saying it out loud to me, makes it sort of really click in that that's the case. Or, if they're not quite there, but it seems obvious to me, and I sort of gently say, well, it seems like what you're saying is, that, and what I'm feeling is XYZ. And then I can kind of help link things up because I'm feeling things with my hands in their body. I'm sort of watching their overall demeanor and how tightly wound they seem to be. I'm listening to whatever they might be saying. I'm noticing that, something else that's sort of typical, like their alignment is way off or something like that, something that would make them sort of chronically feel off balance or have back pain or whatever. And if I can sort of help connect the dots for them with all those seemingly disparate elements of what's happening in their life, and they have that light bulb moment, to me, that is a little miracle. It's not angel singing or anything, but it's a lot of people don't even have and I'm sure especially in your line of work, people don't even have the bandwidth to just sort of spend an hour like they do with me, or even an hour and a half if it's a longer session, just kind of connecting the dots, just having that attention that they're paying to themselves, that someone else is paying to them, to make connections. And then again, that sort of that sense of understanding what's happening to you and why is so powerful. It's not a cure-all, but it really can take the edge off of what otherwise can be just really, a lot of pain or what seems like an unbearable situation or whatever. So I would call those kind of little miracles. And yeah. I could like in terms of antibiotics, which is a big thing that I feel in people's bodies. Oftentimes people will come in and like say digestion and lower back are their sort of two top long-term things. And they've, the people that I see often have been to many, many doctors over a long period of time. And they're doing all the right things and they're trying really hard, but they're not really feeling any better. Maybe it's a little better, but really not. And if I'm doing some visceral manipulation work, which is work with their internal organs, and say I'm feeling their small intestine or their large intestine, and I can, over the years, I've developed, it's not like voodoo or magic or anything, but I've developed an ability to kind of sense things like, is their microbiome even present or does it feel kind of wiped out? And there have been a number of times, I mean, we're talking dozens probably, when I've said, so I'm wondering if any part of, what's going on with your digestion could possibly be antibiotic related. Like, have you recently been on antibiotics or things like that? And people, nobody would have mentioned that to me necessarily, but that little light will go on in their eyes and they'll say, oh yeah, I was on antibiotics for 10 years or something like that because I had bad acne or, or I think it was just a couple of months ago, I had somebody who said, oh, I've had strep throat 24 times and I've been on antibiotics, all those 24 times plus add X number of other times for other random things, or like they used to always give antibiotics for sinus infections. So people who have, around here we have bad air quality and stuff. And so, but they've never thought of that before because maybe they were a kid, now they're 50 years old or whatever. But if you've been on antibiotics 30 times, guess what? Your microbiome is more than likely never going to be the same. And but that is really good and important information to have. And all of that irritation in your digestive tract could be over the years backing up and hurting your back. And, so it's just those light bulb moments that, that just help people get a little further down the road of figuring themselves out and hopefully feeling better.
Like a cascading sort of event.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, so many people's lives are so busy that it's not like it's rocket science, but they've just never really had the chance to kind of think it through with somebody giving them feedback from their sort of their body side of the conversation. And a lot of people never have that chance or that luxury or that opportunity.
I think you'd mentioned before too that sometimes the antibiotic pain, I don't know if pain's the right word, but can manifest in like the knees. I remember you saying something about the knees.
Yeah, I often find that, especially if it's more recent, that if somebody's been on antibiotics, that it feels like it tends to affect the right lower quadrant of their abdomen more. And I have many times had people come in and their presenting issue is that their right knee is bothering them, but they don't know why. And there isn't anything obvious wrong with the right knee. And if I feel that part of their abdomen and it kind of has that, antibiotic feeling, I don't know how to describe it. And I'll just ask, I'm not assuming I'm right or anything, but I'll sort of say, any chance you've been on antibiotics recently? And almost always they'll say, oh yeah, I just finished, a 6-week course or something like that. I mean, usually it's kind of a significant amount. And then I can work with the organs in that area and reduce the inflammation and what have you. And maybe they go and they get a probiotic. I mean, I'm not an expert in that, but maybe they do something like that as well. And I can kind of reassure them that probably their knee is going to settle down. But, they're like walking in saying, I have no idea why my knee is hurting. What is going on?
Right. Mysterious.
So at least, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And okay.
And yeah, also I don't want to sound like too woo-woo, like things like feeling the microbiome and stuff. It is not magic at all. I always tell people it's kind of like people who can drink or sip a wine and tell you, where it was grown or what year it was or something like that. It's just a skill that they've developed, in that case with their palate. For me, it's just skill that I've developed over the years with my hands, but it is not like magic, a gift only given to me. By no means. I don't have any, special. It's just that I've been doing this every day for years. So, it's like you can tell the tone of what's going on, with a caller or an officer when they call you because you listen on the radio all day long. So I don't want to give the impression that like it's not anything super mystical or. It's just, years of palpation all day long. That's all I do is feel what's going on inside people's bodies.
And then I know you took a special class, but the cadavers to learn.
Dissection. Yeah.
Yeah. And was that part of learning where things, I mean, how did that all work? How did you end up mastering that? Because it sounds like it's a mastered skill. It's a skill that you figured out you had, and then you mastered it. So how did How did that happen?
No, it's a skill that I did not know I had at all, and I didn't have. But I had been doing regular massage for a number of years, and my hands were really starting to hurt. So I did not know I had any other kind of skill. I really didn't have any other kind of skill, but I was looking for other techniques that would help people more, and that also, since I wanted to do this for the rest of my career, wouldn't hurt my hand. You know, I thought, well, if my hands are hurting now and I'm 30, how am I going to still be doing this job when I'm 60? So I was looking for techniques both that would help people more, be more sort of broad ranging than just massage, but also in my own self-interest, because I like it. I was looking for things that would save my hands. So I did not have the skills. I just took a bunch of classes and, you know, work every day, and it just kind of developed. That's what I meant. It's like not a gift from God or anything. You know, it's just years and years and years and years of
mastering a skill.
I just can't help but think of like equating it to like a ninja.
Yeah.
Training at, you know, stealth for their whole life.
So they make it look easy, right?
Yeah, like that's what it sounds like you've done, is you've trained for a long time to, you know, and then you just happen to be like, oh, I can do this. Like, you know, you didn't set out to find it, but you found it.
Totally, exactly. And you know, that I just really, I never want people to think, oh, I have some magical skill, so they need to pay me $1,000 because, you know, I'm so special. No, not at all. I mean, it just years and years of repetition. Like, Gabe, if I tried to play one of your games, I couldn't do it. But easy for you. I mean, you know, we all have our, you know, things that we've just done a lot of and we've practiced. And
we each have our own unique skill sets.
Yeah, exactly.
Our 10,000 hours of practice that makes you a master.
Totally.
But you have to have the desire and the connection to what that is. Like you said, you didn't know that that's what you were going to do. It's not that you set out to be a ninja palpator. Can we call it that?
I think
ninja
so,
palpation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Gabe, you can trademark that.
Okay.
But you, I mean, it seems like you have I think where your unique ability, and other people can do this also. I'm not trying to say it's like beyond, but one of your unique abilities is that you're a really good listener on all levels. And that is, I think, hard to find.
Well, just like, you know, since Dawn, you and I've been friends forever, you know, you've talked about your job. I mean, I feel like I'd be the worst dispatcher in the world, but because it takes a certain special combination of skills, and not everybody has that. And yeah, just, of course, not everybody has. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't want to spend their whole career in a very quiet room, you know, touching people's bodies.
Yeah. Ew.
You know, it could get boring, and yeah. But yeah, you know, over the years of, I think that combination of meeting people where they're at, listening to what they have to say, listening to their body, and just kind of giving them that information, that, because a lot of us don't really, we just know something hurts, but, you know, we don't have necessarily the skills to sort of think about, well, maybe it's the antibiotics that I took last week. Why would you think that about if your knee is hurting? Nobody would think that. It just so happens that because, you know, done it so many times over the years, it sort of light bulb went off for me. Oh, I feel like I've seen this before. Ding, ding, ding.
Because you're so tuned into your body as well. Do you think that that's perhaps where some of your connection and being able to listen to other people's bodies came from? And does that seem?
I don't know. I never really thought about it before. In fact, I guess in general in my career, what I've tried to do is not really think about it and just kind of follow what seemed to be working, and without attaching a lot of my own preconceived notions or plans, or, you know, I've just sort of tried to operate my main driver has just been to help people as much as I can, because most of the people, like I said, that I work with are kind of in hopeless situations. I mean, maybe they're probably not going to die of whatever they have, but they are miserable, and they're just in some kind of chronic pain, and they're exhausted, and again, these are not folks who have been ignoring it. They've usually been to lots of really good specialists. They've driven up to Baltimore to Johns Hopkins. I mean, they've really, done their due diligence, and, maybe the medicine helps some, but frankly, it's still pretty crappy. And so I've just always tried to think, well, what else could I possibly do or learn that could, even if I could reduce their pain by 10% or 20%, and and show them a smiling face and give them a big hug, it doesn't sound like that much, but for people who are kind of facing a bleak situation, it really does. It's better than nothing. And so that's always kind of driven me. I guess, it makes sense maybe in my subconscious that my thinking about, what might help my own body was part of that, but it wasn't like at a conscious level. I just sort of tried to trust that if helping people feel a little better was my overriding goal, that somehow it would all, I would be sort of led by the nose to the things that would help the most and that would, that would be of the greatest service. And I've frankly kind of tried to leave my very Germanic planning type of brain out of it. So it's, I haven't really, consciously connected it with my body, but certainly, I've got chronic stuff too. Everybody does,
Mm-hmm.
So that whole kind of, well, let's plug away at it. Maybe if I do this, it'll be 10% better. And then if I add this other thing, maybe it'll be 10% better. And maybe before you know it, I feel 50% better. And heck, that's better than taking, narcotics forever or something that is really, really destructive for my body. So.
And so I know that you have your own body regime for how you feel. Would you be willing to share what you do for yourself and how that works?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, probably the single best thing I do for my body is actually meditation, which I think we've talked about this before. A lot of people have received the recommendation to meditate. Wherever
you should.
Exactly. They go to therapy, they're told to meditate, they go to, and so a lot of people have tried it and hate it. They don't want to do it. They feel guilty for not wanting to do it. And it's just this whole negative feedback loop. So even though that's a really important thing for me, I actually almost try to avoid that as a dirty word with people because I see their eyes kind of glaze over if I say that word. So if I do say it, I usually immediately throw in a ton of caveats of but meditation can look a lot of different ways. So I'm not saying you have to sit quietly in a room with your eyes closed and just breathe. But what I sort of try to say to people is anything that feels meditative to you, because if it doesn't help you, if it actually just freaks you out, then what's the point? So and I'll try to give examples. Like for some people, it's just taking a walk or listening to music or taking 10 deep breaths or petting their pet. It doesn't have to look a certain way, but any of those things because that is going to downregulate your nervous system. So that's kind of why it's such a big player, because again, no matter what the problem is, whether you understand it or not, whether you have a diagnosis or not, if you can, downregulate your sympathetic nervous system, it's pretty much guaranteed that anything you have going on will not be as bad, not feel as bad.
So when you do those things that are not, classic meditation, is there a certain mental state that you end up in, or just, you know what I mean? What does that downgrade sort of look like? Or
yeah, I mean, well, I remember listening to one of your earlier episodes with the couple where the husband is a police officer and the wife, I think,
Tanner
was a
and
stay-at-home
Mandy.
mom.
Yeah, the Bazers.
That was
the
awesome
Bazers.
couple. And it was so beautiful the way they were talking about how they kind of support each other and everything. And she was saying, I can just tell when he needs to go out in the woods and hunt. To me, not many people maybe would call that meditation, but that's obviously his meditation. I mean, that's what he comes back and he feels better, right? So, I mean, it really, really does not have to look a certain way, but I would assume he could tell you, all right, when I leave to go hunt, I feel one way. By the time I come back, I feel another way. That's downregulating the nervous system. I mean, that's so.
Basic meditation in a
It
different
sounds like
format.
meditation we defined as something that is simple, relaxing, and calming.
Yeah. And I kind of would add to that in some way clears your mind. I wouldn't put watching TV as meditation, right? Because you're caught up in a story.
You're stimulated still.
Exactly. And even reading a book, of course, that's a peaceful type of thing, but you're still
stimulated.
Totally. Exactly. So that's the only caveat I would add. Maybe, singing a song that you really like with complicated lyrics. Maybe not meditative.
I think you're still mentally stimulated. I think it has to be calming and relaxing and low to no stimulation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Honestly,
But
hunting sounds pretty good because you're out there, you're away from technology, you're
yeah,
in nature. So
Going for
totally.
a walk, going for
Yeah.
probably a
I
hike.
mean,
Yeah, like-
I know you guys have a dog who loves to chase the frisbee. In a way, like if you're out there throwing the frisbee for the dog is just so happy. I bet it makes you happy to look
It
at the
does.
dog. Are you necessarily thinking about anything else? Maybe not. Maybe you're just watching your dog be super happy dog. I would
Exactly.
call that a meditative thing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
because you're
I think
not
it
like
fits
engaged in
the.
a certain story. Yeah.
I think it fits the framework. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to imagine you guys throwing the frisbee for the dog and you feeling more anxious while you're doing that. Why would you? You're
so
watching your
true.
dog and be like
Well,
totally happy.
now that you say that, with this
Until the
particular
frisbee
dog
goes
we
in the
have,
tree.
frisbee a tree, or
Oh, okay.
or if he gets crazy and starts trying to catch it and break his leg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That would be a little stimulating.
We've had
Okay,
some
there
bad
is a
sprains with
moment.
him.
But what's nice is we can find that sweet spot of like,
Yeah.
yeah.
95% of the time, it's calming.
Right. And then I guess I would take that one step further and say, so, if you start off by assuming that most people, let's be honest, don't want to do traditional meditation,
Right.
then the next thing is, what does do it for you? Like actually becoming an active participant in working with your own mind. Because I know I'm a body worker, but frankly, I think a lot about the mind because it's all the same deal. So, that's where the human, you kind of have to put something into it yourself. So paying attention. So when do I feel, whatever you want to call it, like downregulated, when do I feel calm, and trying to figure out what are the elements to that? How can I repeat that? How can I sneak that feeling into situations where I normally don't feel calm? Like, working with it, like training yourself sort of to amplify that wherever you can. And again, Dawn, I mean, my whole life is like in a super calm setting, but translating it to your kind of world, don't even ask me. I don't know how you would do that, but I'm sure you have developed some tricks over the years. I don't know whether you like pause and take a deep breath or go outside, walk around the building for a minute. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any sort of possible ways to slip in a moment of Zen, if it's a bad day at work?
So there's a few things that I have that I can't say I've consistently done all of these things, but I can say that these things have
Or things
worked
you've
for
seen
me.
other people do.
Yeah. So there's some ideas that of like having a necklace or a bracelet that sort of reminds me of like that sort of touch and like moment, take a breath. Usually having something on me that means something helps. So I usually wear a necklace when I'm at work. I usually will end up touching it. I usually try to remember when I'm touching the necklace to take a deep breath and just sort of have that moment.
Yeah, because you can't unplug and just walk away from the phones, right? So what can you do while you're still sitting there attached to the phone?
Exactly. And so oftentimes the necklaces end up with more meaning than I originally had intended. Like I wondered, why do I always want to wear a necklace? Oh gosh, isn't this a great thing? And that ends up working. The other thing that has really worked too, after a really intense period of time or call or whatever, is to go to the bathroom and then really wash my hands. Like the intentional how I wash my hands, like I'm going to get every fingertip, I'm going to get every knuckle, I'm going to, like I really work from the tips of my fingers to my wrists. And if it's particularly bad, I'll end up trying to go to my elbow and then wash my face and get the back of my neck. And that I don't always remember those moments. Sometimes it'll be, I tend to not process things until later. So an emotional thing might happen. That's not the day it's going to be a problem for me. It'll be the next week. It'll be 3 days later. And that's when it's important to remember, I need to take a moment in the bathroom and maybe cry a little if it doesn't happen often, but really bad situations where something comes up, like I can think of 3 times. A moment in the bathroom of just like a quick, okay, got it, wash up really good, and I'm ready. Do you find that food ends up being a pretty big part of any of your conversations, or is that just something you kind of leave with people?
Not really, I want, when people are working with me, part of my, well, really one of my biggest goals is that they feel really comfortable And so, like I said, I barely even use the word meditation anymore like I used to. And now I barely even say that because of the number of times that people's eyes have gone, oh my God, she's going to make me meditate. I hate meditating. I don't want to meditate. I've been told to do this for 10 years and I don't want to.
Deep breathing.
Have you found that people don't know really what meditation is?
They don't, but they know enough to be scared and to feel sense of dread and obligation. And I mean, how is that helpful? And shame and guilt and like, oh, I should meditate. I know I should meditate. So it's it's gotten into this whole like meditation is negative now for people. I mean, that's terrible.
Definitely feels self-defeating of a thing.
Exactly. Totally. So, what was I saying? But like so I want people to feel good. So I rarely, like I said, I hardly ever use the word meditation anymore. I'll say something that feels meditative to you. And then we talk from there. I rarely talk to people about food and I rarely talk to people about exercise because aren't those things that generally triggers to guilt, shame, rage, embarrassment, negativity, you name it.
Spiral downhill.
So, if the person brings it up, fine. But also, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't, I don't really know much about the science of food at all. So who am I to say? If like there have been times, I know this might sound a little woo-woo, where I have gotten the feeling from somebody's digestive tract that maybe, for example, they have sensitivity to dairy. Let's just as an example, because that's, it's fairly common. Not like lactose intolerance, but a sensitivity. And so like, I think it was ice cream. I was getting that sense from somebody. Again, I try to hardly ever bring up food, but I said something like, I was just wondering, is there any chance that like you have some sensitivity to lactose or, does it run in your family? Like, is that even possible? Or if not, just forget it and I'll move on to something else. And they were like, oh yeah, I've been told that and I just can't resist having ice cream every night. And I drink I think this person said they drink like a quart of milk a day. And so they know they are probably making themselves sick, but they can't stop. Well, I'm not going to guilt trip them about that. They have whatever reason they have. Then, but then that's information that we have. And I'll try to work with their digestive tract to make it less reactive. And maybe if they're working with somebody like me who's like totally not judging them, maybe there's that person did eventually actually kind of move away from dairy because now there are lots of nice alternatives. I mean, I eat dairy myself. It's not like I have an agenda, but they were literally kind of making themselves sick. But would my nagging at them have helped?
No.
They were already nagging at themselves. We all carry around all of our guilt and shame about all this stuff. So I try to go way the other way. Like, what can I do to help you feel better? No judgment. We're all judging ourselves plenty.
If only more providers had that mindset.
Absolutely.
I think
agree.
We'd be pretty good off.
Yeah. I mean, really, I know what I say to myself in my own head, and it is bad. I would never say that negative stuff out loud to somebody else. I'm going to say it to myself, though. So basically everybody's walking around doing that. I try to be like the voice at the other end of the spectrum. I'm giving them loving touch. I'm not judging them, and I'm just giving them the opportunity to kind of make connections that hopefully will help them feel better.
I think there was a couple of things that I found really helpful in our conversations about just an idea of looking at gratitude as a methodology of changing sort of the ingrained patterns of thinking that we have, which is sort of like cognitive behavioral therapy in a way, just a simple gratitude practice. So I was wondering if you would be willing to share that gratitude practice, which is a little different from your professional life, but
that's me and me doing that. Yeah.
And it's called gratitude practice?
No, the book
was not the book, but I meant like the thing you're talking about.
Yeah, gratitude practice. The book I think is called The Last Law of Attraction Book You'll Ever Need.
That's a simple one.
That gets into the end of the spectrum, which is why I don't really know if your listeners would be interested. But the part of the book that worked for me that I'm using is basically I'm always trying to look for ways to trick my mind, trick my brain out of that whole negativity thing. For some reason, I always tell people, for some reason, bad posture feels easier than good posture. And negative thoughts and negative self-talk is somehow more habitual than positive. Why is that? Like, why is it harder to stand up straight and be kind to ourselves? Why do we go the other way? Like, it takes active effort to have good posture. It takes active effort to talk nicely and kindly to ourselves the way we would talk to anybody else, but we don't, to ourselves, we're so harsh and stuck in these negative patterns. And then of course what I do is I see it in people's bodies down the road too. But anyway, that's so I'm always looking for ways to trick my brain out of that. And so just trying to be almost like a stream of consciousness blitzing of gratitude. Like when I'm taking a walk or in my car, I'll just try to say things that I'm grateful for. And the little sort of mind trick part of it, like Jedi mind trick thing, is that you say things you're grateful for in the present and things you're grateful for that happened in the past, like, oh, I'm grateful that my parents, were good parents to me or something like that. Or I'm grateful that I, grew up with lots of beautiful trees around me. I mean, any random stuff. But then you also add in things that haven't yet happened in the future that you're hoping will happen. And you say that you're grateful for them as though they have already happened. So you're kind of like tricking your brain into feeling positive about things that maybe you usually are dreading or worrying about. What have we talked about, Dawn? Like, worrying about the end of our parents' lives and wanting the end of our parents' lives to be peaceful and easy and not stressful. Well, of course, we can't control that. We worry about it. We dread it. We don't know how that could possibly be, that they could really just have a beautiful ending to their lives. But if I say to myself, oh, I'm so grateful that my parents just had such an easy passing, that it was peaceful for them, not painful, easy for me, and that it wasn't like it didn't completely disrupt my life, and I didn't have to quit my job and go take care of them. Wasn't that wonderful? I'm so grateful. And, sort of tricking my brain out of that constant like worry and niggle and oh God, what am I going to do when my parents get sick? Well, I have to quit my job, and that's not helpful.
Right. It's not solutions. It's just a well-worn route of constant thought process. Yeah.
And that's what I'm also doing with clients with my hands in sessions. Like, they may be talking about their well-worn thought process that is worrying them, or maybe they're lying there asleep. I'm looking for those ruts. I'm looking for the ruts in their nervous system. I'm looking for the ruts in their bodies, which are usually these negative patterns that we all have. How can we kind of fill in those ruts, make different connections, so that it's less painful to just exist in our own bodies and minds.
Yeah, to relieve suffering. I mean, in the end, that's really what we're all talking about is,
Totally.
how to relieve our own suffering, how to help others stop with their suffering, and how can we make anything easier, more enjoyable. So I think that whole idea, it's a tricky one for me to figure out the way to turn the future worries into a different thought process, but I like the challenge.
Yeah, I don't even know if I explained it well, but and like I was saying to you earlier when we were talking about it, like the things that it's hardest to figure out how to say, like, how can I possibly figure out a way to say that I'm grateful for this when I don't even know how that could happen? That's how your brain is really stuck in a negative rut with it, And then as by extension into the work that I do with my clients, probably somewhere in my body is a rut that's attached to that's maybe that pain in my back, or maybe that pain in my neck, because I'm kind of stuck in like, oh God, I don't want my parents to suffer, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And that's somewhere in my body too.
Yeah, exactly. That worry.
How, any recommendations to implement better sleep hygiene?
Well, again, I mean, everybody's read all the lists on all the websites and the books and everything.
But
about
any unique insights?
Unique insights.
Oh, I will say this from being the lovely guest here. One of the major things that I find most comfortable here is extra padding in the bed. In the guest bed, there's this really big piece of foam that's probably 5 to 8 inches thick. That is just the width of my body. I sleep so much better with that extra foam. it sounds ridiculous, but
And it's a cheap piece of foam too.
exactly. And I like, why don't I have this at my own home? I've slept on this bed, and I was offered which bed would I prefer, because it's such a great hostess here. And I was like, I want I want the yellow room with the big pad, because it's amazing how much less I wake up just from not having body pain.
Totally, yeah. And Gabe, to kind of try to answer your question, sleep is another one that everybody has been told what they should do. And so actually it is almost like another guilt-inducing thing. Well, you
True.
really should turn off your electronics. Well, you really should meditate for half an hour before bed. Well, you really, shouldn't eat anything 6 hours before you try to go to sleep. I mean, so it's another thing where I ask people how their sleep is, and I usually don't make any recommendations. I just,
Less than recommendations on how to do it. I actually thought of something that I thought I'd bounce off you guys, but for me, what's really important about like getting better sleep hygiene is identifying why you have a problem.
Okay.
Like
That's fair.
for you with the extra padding.
Oh yeah.
That probably would solve your own problem here at home. We should look at buying one for you. I'm also curious.
Exactly. And pillows.
Pillows are a big thing too. Yeah.
It's partly that. It's also partly,
because for me,
all those other,
for my sleep hygiene's terrible and all that. And the biggest reason is that I feel like I'm losing out on something, losing on time when I go to bed and sleep a decent 8 hours. I feel like I've lost time. So I know that, and I'm like, well, whatever. I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I don't have that at all. So it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. But I do know other people who have that same but I'll miss out on maybe.
Well, I think, Gabe, you hit the nail on the head that we have to sort of ask ourselves, what's, I guess, I wouldn't necessarily say honesty with ourselves, but just self-inquiry. And that's what I'm trying to sort of mentor my clients with is non-judgmental self-inquiry, super gentle. We're not saying, therefore you have to do this, this, and this, but, and we can do that with ourselves. I'm just sort of helping my clients sort through it and giving them, again, that feedback from their body that they might not necessarily be aware of, but just self-inquiry. So what is it? And so now you know that about yourself, Gabe, right? Then you sort of have the power to choose. Then it's an informed decision, right? All right, I'm going to sleep less because there's this that I don't want to miss, or I'm going to go ahead and sleep anyway. But just that little bit of self-knowledge, just like that little bit of downregulating of the nervous system, all these little things, like you were saying, death by 1,000 cuts, Gabe, what about, I don't know, some other thing, life by 1,000, something else, something positive.
Right. Blessings or something, or
some non-triggering word for people.
Right.
Small choices, or
small choices,
and how to be, just small, and gentle with ourselves. And, hopefully what I'm providing at my end of the spectrum and why people are coming to see me is more information from their bodies and about what's going on and, hopefully sort of helping ease things in their body, but as a part of a self-inquiry process, very, non-judgmental self-inquiry process.
A student of our own systems and what's going on.
I forget which one of our guests had said at this point, but someone had said, identify where you're feeling the feelings.
Oh, that was Helene.
That was good.
Somatic.
Yeah.
It's the similar thing.
And Dawn, you were saying often if you have something really terrible happen at work, it's not that day that you notice it, but over the years, hopefully you've come to recognize if it's a week later and maybe in the beginning of your career, you wouldn't have realized why you were having a terrible day. Hopefully now you do. And you can go to the bathroom and have a quick cry and wash your hands, because you've done that self-inquiry over the years, and it's a small thing, but hopefully does it make a difference when you can do that or when you recognize that that's what happened?
Absolutely. And it definitely helps to connect. Oftentimes it's also talking to whoever is in dispatch who may have either shared the experience or wants to know what happened. from that inquiring mind, not a judgmental mind of like, so what happened? And, sort of sharing that experience helps also, because sometimes there's pieces that I didn't know, I didn't understand, or I hadn't thought about. And I think to inquire like about the rest of the story or what other people are experiencing, which normalizes it. And there's something about normalizing that everybody has digestive problems, everybody has sleep problems. That helps also, like if we're all sharing the same burden, I'm not alone, I'm not ostracized, I'm not isolated, we're in the boat together.
Right.
Really helps.
That's in the process of what I'm trying to give my clients and provide for them is like, if I ask them about digestion, they weren't coming to me for that, for example. Maybe they were coming because their knees were bothering them or something. But I try really hard to ask the questions. You probably have to do this in dispatch too. You're asking a question to elicit an answer, not to shut the person down, but to get the information that you need. And so I will, if it, depending on the person's personality, make a little joke and be like, don't worry, I talk about poop all day long, because people will even go to their gastroenterologist and be too embarrassed to talk about it. But again, I mean, everybody poops, everybody pees. We all, are acutely aware of those functions in our bodies. So there's nothing to be embarrassed about, but I try to find those ways to help people normalize it, talk about it, and then connect with it in that sort of spirit of self-inquiry, and then hopefully there are little solutions out there, or big solutions, and
for your 1,000 cuts, little band-aids for your 1,000
there
cuts.
you go, band-aids for the 1,000 cuts. Oh, we're just going to take this metaphor and run with it.
The 1,000 band-aids. Life by 1,000 band-aids.
Wasn't there some band that was like 1,000 something or other, or 10,000?
10,000 maniacs. 10,000 band-aids.
10,000 maniacal band-aids.
Oh my gosh, it's part of your ninja training.
Oh my! All right, we're looping back to ninja.
Full circle.
Yeah, I don't want to let this ninja thing go. I'm excited about the ninja. Nobody's ever called me a ninja before.
What about body whisperer?
Ooh,
it kind of has like
a
1-900.
Kind of creepy sounding, but hey,
like I'm leaning over the client and I'm whispering to their colon, like.
Well, I was thinking like you could.
Can you hear me?
Like when you're talking about being able to feel the like antibiotic thing or whatever, it's like you're listening to their body.
Yeah, I mean, that's the radio station my hands are tuned into, and again, it's not like it's magical or anything. It's just, I've tuned my fingers to that station for 26 years. So of course,
ninja tuned them.
Ninja tuned
the fingers. That's going to be part of your, it's going to be on buses. It's going to be part of your billboards.
We're going that way. I kind of like being under the radar.
No, I'm sorry.
On the podcast.
You're going to be on Oprah. Life by 1,000 Band-Aids, brought to you by Ninja Whisper. What'd you call it? Whispering.
1,000 maniacal Band-Aids? Oh, no.
Body Whisper.
Body Whisper, yeah. A body listener?
I've had people, I've had people come in before and said, can you help me lose weight? And I always say, if I could do that, I'd be a billionaire. I'd be on Oprah. I wouldn't be here in my little office in Rockville, Maryland. Are you kidding? I wouldn't be talking to you.
So what are your hopes for the future? Do you have any that you'd be willing to share? What are some big gratitudes that are going to happen? I'm grateful for my
heavens. I would like to take a little more vacation on a very personal note.
Yes.
After 26 years, I'd love to take more than 2 weeks a year. That would be great. Let's see. I hope my hands hold out. I am grateful that my hands have held out for the full duration of my career. I guess I just, what I see, especially in the DC area, is a lot of that kind of existential angst that I was saying. Like everybody all over has all their personal stuff. And like I said, most people have some kind of ache or pain, some system that plagues them. They're not sleeping or whatever. So that's kind of universal. But I have to say the last several years, with COVID and all the kinds of other things, and I know you've said that, Donna, that with the police department, that, I feel like people are also just really being more burdened by the bigger stuff. So it's such a combination. So my hope for the future is, first of all, that I can maintain like my zen and my optimism. I mean, optimism is a tough thing to locate these days, and then also somehow find ways to help my clients feel that without it being like, oh, put a smiley face sticker on your car and you'll be happier, something real, like how to be realistically optimistic. That seems impossible, right? I mean, because if we're realistic, then we have to be pessimistic because everything is not going well. So that's kind of my personal and professional goal, is to somehow find a wellspring of optimism that feels genuine, that's not like Pollyanna, namby-pamby, I live with my head in the clouds. And I mean, I don't even know how I would do that in your profession, where you're really dealing with people who are having their very worst day. But even in my profession, day after day after day, people are telling me how much pain they're in. Yeah. And so it's hard for me to stay optimistic. And I especially want to feel that deeply enough in myself that I can pass it on to them in a genuine way, a heartfelt way, a way that feels real. That's quite a challenge, Yeah. And I just hope that I can maintain that for another, whatever, like 20 years or so of this career. That if I can't, then I'll stop, because that I feel like is the most valuable thing I'm passing on to people, especially since more and more people are just kind of feeling worn down and burdened by, everything.
So let's see, in a gratitude statement, I am grateful for Christina's continued optimism through through our retirement, through to our retirement.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could say the same thing to you, Dawn, right?
I know, right? It's true. Yeah. It's a hard one to flip.
Yeah. I know. Gratitude statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I'm trying to practice it, Gabe. I'm trying to bring it home.
Be unwieldy. But I feel like it's kind of worth a try.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I like the
it's
flipping
like a game. I mean, I think of it as kind of a game. How do I say I'm grateful for something that I really don't think could ever work out or happen? But
so again, we had a guest on here talk about the I need to statements are bad. You should do the I choose to.
Oh, yes, that was Stephanie Kahn. She was talking about... Oh, yes, she hasn't. It was basically the positive attitude. It actually is under that. And instead of like, oh, when I get home, I have to go for a walk. It's the, when I get home, I get to go for a walk. I choose to go for a walk, or that it's sort of that choice part. I get to choose to go on vacation more often. So that is a different way to do it. Similar, but different. Oh,
same
good
kind
point,
of
Gabe.
Thing, yeah. Like, I choose to go do the dishes.
I'm so grateful I have dishes to wash.
Because that means I had food, which means that I am...
Right, yes. It's sort of like fake it till you make it. But it's like you would do with a toddler, like, oh boy, we get to get in the car now and go to the doctor and get a shot. Oh boy. You're half lying, but you're hoping it's gonna, come through as this really positive
without overly positive Patty. It's such a weird balance between the like, I'm not going to polish a turd because that's dumb. We all know it's a turd. So how do we balance?
Yeah,
realistic optimism. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Optimism. I was going to say, I really, really, really try hard with my clients to not come across as some like witch magical, let me heal you, and and help you lose 50 pounds and just pay me a lot of money. I don't want to. I don't want to do that. I'd be lying, obviously, anyway. But I don't. What I want is for people, to feel somehow, if possible, realistically optimistic.
Yeah.
I mean.
And leave your office a little lighter, a little more joyous, a little more room for their own gratitude. Like, I feel better. Maybe I'll sleep better.
Exactly.
Wait, gratitude. I sleep so well. We would like to thank our guest, Christina Bour, and thank you for letting us share your space and come to Rockville, Maryland to have a special interview. I'm a roving reporter at this point. And thank you for all of your years of wisdom and ninja hand body work.
Thank you so much. This has been an honor to be on here, and I hope anything at all that I said, helps somebody a little bit, just sort of understand and be a little more realistically optimistic, if at all possible.
Right? That's us, realistically
I
optimistic.
think that's the
So
goal
thank
of the
you.
whole podcast.
Yeah,
Just
actually,
to try to help somebody become
Right.
more realistically optimistic. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, because I mean, you all are dealing with acute stuff, but your own trauma, for those of you who work in emergency services, right down is kind of chronic, like day after day of dealing with people in the midst of a crisis. It's a chronic condition, so to speak,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Yeah.
actually even talked about, Stephanie Kahn talks about secondary trauma exposure. Chronic exposure is, like doctors and nurses and first responders really do see it a lot. And yeah, it's something to work with. And it's like you said, once you have it named and you kind of know what it is, you can find the optimistic way through it.
There you go.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Echo of Connections. You can find us on Audible and on Amazon, Spotify, our YouTube channel, iTunes, and anywhere else you can find your favorite podcast. You can check out behind the scenes, bio of our guests, and blog entries on our website at echoofconnections.com. Goodbye, and thank you for listening.